Welcome. There are moments in history when the familiar story of our world feels incomplete. Times when the pages of the Earth's vast book seem to have been torn out, leaving gaps in the tale we tell ourselves. We speak of the rise of humanity as though it were inevitable, as though the first firelight flickering in a cave was the very beginning of intelligence on this planet. But tonight, let us drift further back into a time before our footsteps marked the dust, into a dawn that may not have been our own. Imagine a world so ancient that even the mountains we know today had not yet lifted their heads to the sky. Oceans sprawled in shapes unrecognizable to our maps. The continents themselves were strangers to one another, wandering slowly across the planet's skin like colossal ships adrift. Above, the air carried scents no living human has breathed-tan alien perfume of volcanic gases, salt spray, and the green temps of ancient seas. It is here, in this forgotten dawn, that whispers of another story begin, one in which humanity is not the first great experiment in intelligence, but perhaps the second, or even the third. Our knowledge of deep time is fragile. We see only fragments, fossils embedded in stone, the layered scars of ancient shorelines, minerals shaped by pressures and temperatures beyond imagination. From these clues, we piece together a timeline that stretches back billions of years, and yet, in that vastness, there are chasms, dark spans of time where the record runs silent. What lived then? What walked, swam, or perhaps flew under alien stars? The stones hold their secrets tightly. Some scientists speak of the Silurian hypothesis, the idea that if a civilization had risen long before humans, its traces might be nearly impossible to find after millions of years. The works of our hands, cities, monuments, machines, are fragile things against the slow grind of geology. Within mere tens of thousands of years, steel turns to rust, concrete crumbles to dust. Within a million, almost nothing remains but the barest hints. And so, if a civilization lived in a distant dawn, the Earth could have erased their story almost completely, but perhaps not entirely. Imagine walking across an empty plain, your boots crunching on weathered stone. The wind is soft, the air dry. You bend, and therein the rock is a strange pattern, too symmetrical, too deliberate to be chance. It is not writing as we know it, not the mark of any tool familiar to human history, and yet it is something crafted. You brush your fingers over it, and for a heartbeat you feel the presence of minds long gone. The possibility of such a world before ours is intoxicating, not because it is proven, but because it reminds us how little we truly know. For if intelligence rose once before, then all our histories, all our myths, may be only the latest verse in a much longer song. Picture this earlier civilization, not human, no reason to expect they would look like us. They may have been scaled, feathered, or covered in fur. They may have breathed air richer or thinner than our own. Perhaps they saw colors beyond our vision, or spoke in tones too deep for our ears to catch. Yet they thought, they built, they dreamed, and maybe, just maybe, they were not alone in the cosmos. For when we imagine a forgotten dawn, we must also wonder what guidance, what interference might have touched it from the stars. We have myths of gods descending from the heavens, of teachers and bringers of knowledge. It is easy to dismiss them as metaphors. But what if they are echoes of something real, memories passed down in ways we can no longer decode? An advanced people from the sky, seeing in this early Earth the spark of a new mind, and helping it grow in the stillness of night. The thought feels less like fantasy and more like inevitability, for the universe is older than we can truly comprehend. If life can arise here, it can arise elsewhere. And if it can become intelligent here, it can become intelligent elsewhere. The distances between stars are vast, but time is vaster still. Let us walk in that other dawn. The sun is smaller in the morning sky, its warmth gentle. Great forests of ferns and strange flowering plants ripple in the breeze. The air is alive with calls that do not belong to birds, clicks, whistles, deep resonant hums. Along a river's edge, a figure moves, pausing to study the water. Its eyes are set wider apart than ours, its skin patterned with iridescent scales that shimmer in the sun. It holds in its hand a tool not of stone, but of something more refined, shaped with care and purpose. In the oceans, too, there is movement that speaks of thought. Sleek, intelligent swimmers herd schools of fish into intricate formations. They work together, not merely for food, but for something else, a ritual, a performance, a tradition perhaps older than we can guess. It is in the cities, if we may call them, that this earlier civilization's mastery reveals itself. Not towers of steel and glass, but structures grown from the living. Earth, cultivated from coral-like materials, shaped by design over decades. Their homes breathe, their streets sing in the wind. And above, great lenses or mirrors track the sky, their purpose lost to us but clear to them. Perhaps they watched the heavens as we do. Perhaps they were waiting. There is a danger in imagining them as perfect, as wise beyond measure. Intelligence is not a shield against folly. Perhaps they too knew war. Perhaps they exhausted their lands, or fought over resources, or sought dominion over one another. The arc of civilization is not always toward survival. And if they had contact from beyond, whether teacher, trader, or conqueror perhaps, that too sowed both wonder and ruin. The end may have come slowly. Rising seas, cooling skies, or the slow drift of continents breaking apart the web of their trade. Or it may have been sudden, a great impact from space, a cascade of volcanic fire, or even a war whose weapons burned away more than cities. And when it was done, when the last of them walked their empty streets and looked to the stars for help that did not come, the earth began its quiet work of forgetting. Storms tore down their walls, roots pried apart their temples, sediment buried their roads, and in time even their bones were gone. Yet perhaps not all traces vanished. There may be, deep beneath the ocean's floor, places where their knowledge lies sealed away, unreachable to us for now. Or on the far side of the moon, a silent artifact that has waited for eons, untouched by wind or rain. And perhaps, somewhere among the stars, a ship still travels, carrying the last children of that forgotten dawn to worlds we will never see. We cannot prove they existed. We may never find the evidence. But in wondering, we stretch our own vision, our own sense of possibility. We remind ourselves that history is more than the story we tell. It is the story we have yet to uncover. And so, tonight, we stand on the edge of two worlds, the one we know and the one we can only imagine. Ahead lies the path into deeper mysteries, into hidden ages, into the long silence before us. And the question lingers: if we are not the first, then what does that make us? The world before our footsteps, before the first human heartbeat, before the first spark leaped from stone to tinder, before even the first ancestor of our kind looked out across the grasslands and wondered what lay beyond the horizon. There was another Earth, not the Earth of our maps and atlases, but a planet clothed in ancient seas, its continents scattered like puzzle pieces not yet fitted together. The skies bore unfamiliar constellations. Some of the stars we know now had not yet been born. Others burned brighter, closer, their light washing the night in strange colors. It was a world without us, but not without watchers. That deep-time Earth is a mystery machine. The further back we look, the more the familiar dissolves into the alien. We measure its past in epochs, eras, and eons, vast stretches of time that dwarf the rise and fall of empires. In the geological calendar, human history is a fraction of a blink. And so when we ask, what happened before us? The answer is swallowed in silence, but not complete silence. The rocks speak if you know how to listen. They carry whispers, patterns in mineral veins, isotopic fingerprints, and fossil shadows that suggest stories far older than our own. Some speak of cataclysms, asteroid impacts, volcanic winters, mass extinctions that cleared the stage for the next act of life. Others hint at strange blooms of complexity, moments when life surged forward in creativity and invention. And it is in those strange blooms that the mind begins to wander. What if one of them was us, but not us? Consider the oceans of the late Cretaceous or the lush swamps of the Carboniferous. These were worlds brimming with life, with resources, with possibilities. Creatures evolved intelligence in the sea long before it appeared on land. Think of the octopus and its cousins. With problem-solving minds, keen eyes, and agile bodies. Given enough time, enough pressure from environment and competition, could such beings have risen higher? Could they have built? Could they have dreamed? Science offers one sobering truth. If a civilization had flourished tens of millions of years ago, there might be almost nothing left to find. Our own cities, if abandoned today, would crumble to dust within 10,000 years. In a million, almost all trace would be gone. In 10 million, the Earth would have scoured itself clean. Yet nature is never perfectly thorough. Sometimes, fragments endure. Picture the world before our footsteps, not as a wild Eden untouched by intelligence, but as a palimpsesta, layered manuscript where new words are written over the faint traces of the old. Beneath our forests, deserts, and seabeds, there might be the ghost architecture of another age, a buried wall of unknown material beneath an Antarctic glacier, a vast geometric pattern of metallic traces deep in the Sahara. The core of a mountain, once molten, hiding within it alloys that should not exist in nature. If such things are there, we have not yet found them. Or perhaps we have, and simply failed to recognize them for what they are. But let us imagine we could see it, the Earth, as it was in this other time. The day begins in violet light. The sun, younger and slightly hotter, throws gold across the horizon. The air carries a dense, humid warmth. In a shallow bay, structures rise from the water like the skeletons of colossal shells. But these are not shells, they are dwellings, grown deliberately from living coral and guided into intricate spirals. The beings who built them swim with easy grace, their sleek bodies covered in subtle patterns that shift with mood and conversation. Their voices carry through the water in layered harmonies, and their hands, yes, hands, though not like ours, move with precision as they weave tools from plant fibers and carve designs into shell plates on land. Another people walks among forests of towering size. They are tall, their skin marked in mosaic patterns of color, each unique. Their eyes are large and reflective, tuned to both day and night. They live in communities woven into the trees themselves, platforms of living wood connected by bridges that sway gently in the wind. They watch the stars from clearings, mapping their movements over generations. And they, too, ask questions. Who are we? Where do we come from? Are we alone? Perhaps these two civilizations knew of each other. Perhaps they traded, or warred, or simply remained apart, each thinking themselves the only intelligence under the sun. And perhaps one night the sky answered them. The myths we have inherited from our own deep past often speak of beings who came from above, serpents of fire, chariots in the clouds, shining teachers who brought knowledge, and sometimes destruction. We assume these are stories born in human minds. But what if such tales began long before us? If visitors from the stars had come to the world before our footsteps, what might they have found? And what might they have left behind? Artifacts on the moon, messages carved in atomic structures that would survive geologic time, a genetic fingerprint hidden in the DNA of some still living species. The thought is both thrilling and unsettling, for it hints that we are not the culmination of intelligence on Earth, but part of a cycle. That perhaps civilizations rise and fall here like tides each, leaving faint traces for the next, each reaching upward until the sky swallows them. And then there is the question that haunts every such imagining. Where did they go? 1,000 answers offer themselves. Climate change beyond their control, a supervolcanic eruption, a shift in the magnetic field that unraveled their technology, a war that burned the very ground they stood on, or perhaps they leapt into the cosmos, leaving Earth to heal in their absence. In the end, the world before our footsteps would have closed like a book. The forests reclaimed the cities, the oceans hid the coral spires, the wind wore away the carvings in stone, and the earth, patient and indifferent, began to write a new chapter ours. But every so often, something slips through the cracks of time, a story from an isolated tribe of sea gods who taught humanity the art of building ships, a strange metallic sphere found in a mine, its structure too perfect to be chance, a map etched in an ancient temple, showing coastlines as they would have been 50 million years ago. We filed these things away as curiosities, coincidences, mysteries for another day. But perhaps, if we placed them side by side, a picture would emerge, a picture of a world that once thrived before ours began. And in that picture, we might see not strangers, but reflections. For if another civilization rose before us, they too must have loved, fought, dreamed, and feared the unknown. They too must have looked at the stars and felt the ache of wanting to understand. And they too, perhaps, wondered if they were the first, or merely the next dot in the deep silence of the geological record. The world before our footsteps waits. It waits for the right eyes to see, the right minds to ask the dangerous questions. And perhaps, one day, when we are ready, it will speak. Until then, it remains a ghost felt, but unseen. A reminder that we are walking not on untouched ground, but on the bones of stories older than we dare to imagine. The Earth is a storyteller, but unlike the tales passed from one human to another, her stories are written not in words, but in layers, strata of stone, deposits of silt, frozen pockets of ice, and the slow chemical signatures that seep through them. Each layer is a page, each mineral grain is a letter, and somewhere in the billions of these pages, there may be chapters we have yet to decipher, chapters about a time before us, a time when something else walked, swam, or soared over this planet and claimed it as home. We call it the geological record, a library so vast that no single mind can grasp it in total. From the earliest Hadean rock-scarred remnants of a molten world to the recent sediments that still smell faintly of rain, the record is our only witness to the planet's deepest past. But like any archive, it has its gaps. Fires consume books, mold eats paper, and on Earth, erosion, subduction, and metamorphosis erase whole volumes. The deeper we dig, the harder it becomes to read. Imagine standing in a remote desert, the sun beating down, wind slicing over the dunes. Beneath your boots lies a cross-section of time, tilted by tectonic forces and laid bare. You see red sandstone and riverbeds. Beneath that, dark Chelan ocean floor, turned to stone. Beneath that, a coarse conglomerate of pebbles and quartz, once a shoreline where waves crashed in an age before mammals existed. Every distinct layer tells us something about the climate, the atmosphere, the creatures that lived and died in that time. And sometimes, it tells us something we can't explain. There are occasional anomalies, metallic spheres embedded in 3 billion rolled rock, polygonal structures in sandstone that seem too precise for nature, isotopic ratios that hint at industrial processes. Long before humans, mainstream geology is cautious here. Most of these findings are explained away as natural oddities, but not all of them are so easily dismissed. Take the so-called London artifact found in the 19th century, a hammer encased in rock that appeared to be over 100 million years old, or the Klerksdorp spheres of South Africa, tiny objects with precise grooves embedded in Precambrian rock 2 billion years old. Skeptics call them pseudofossils, or the result of mineral concretion. Yet, what if they are not? The rocks not only speak of life, they speak of its endings. There have been at least 5 mass extinctions in Earth's history, each one wiping out the dominant life forms of the age. The Permian extinction, the Great Dying, erased over 90% of marine species and 70% of land species. It was a clean slate on a planetary scale. The Cretaceous extinction, famously triggered by an asteroid, ended the reign of the dinosaurs. If a civilization had existed before us, these extinction events could have been their undoing. Imagine a society stretched across continents, confident in its mastery of the world, suddenly faced with a firestorm, a decade-long darkness, poisoned seas, and collapsing ecosystems. Even the most advanced technology might falter against such overwhelming force. What would remain? A thin, dark layer in the rock iridium from the impact, carbon from burned forests, a faint signal of plastics or alloys that nature does not create. That's all. Millions of years later, that might be all we leave behind too. Geologists sometimes speak of time compression, how events millions of years apart can lie inches apart in the rock. To a casual eye, a fossil from one era may seem close to another, but in reality, the two creatures never met. This compression makes it possible for clues from different civilizations, separated by millions of years, to appear in the same dig site. Some researchers in the fringe sciences speculate about what they call alien stratolayers that contain patterns, materials, or structures that do not fit the known geology of their period. For example, thin seams of fused glass, not from volcanic origin, but similar to trinitite glass formed by nuclear detonations, microscopic spheres of iron and other metals, consistent with high-energy vaporization, nanostructures embedded in quartz, too symmetrical to be random. Mainstream academia rarely engages with these claims, yet the soil does not lie. If such artifacts exist, they would be the fingerprints of an age when another intelligence shaped this planet, perhaps even fought wars upon it. If you were an ancient civilization and you knew your world was dying, how would you leave a message? Paper rots, metal corrodes, buildings collapse, but stone endures. Some theorists propose that certain megalithic structures, such as inexplicable standing stones in remote areas, might not be entirely the work of our ancestors. Perhaps they are palimpsest, built upon older markers left by forgotten engineers. And what of the geological anomalies, shaped like giant geometric forms? Some may be natural, others perhaps not. One intriguing example is the Yonaguni Monument. Off the coast of Japan, massive terraces and steps carved into submerged rock. Most believe it to be a natural formation, yet divers have found patterns that look like stairways, platforms, and even carving marks. Could this be the weathered skeleton of a coastal city from an age long before ours, one now hidden under the weight of time and ocean? Let's widen the lens. If another civilization rose on Earth millions of years ago, there is a chance they were not alone. Some could have been visited, perhaps guided or disrupted by beings from beyond. We imagine aliens as entirely foreign, but what if they were kin of a sort, advanced descendants of life from Earth itself, returning after eons of travel between the stars? If such visitors arrived, their presence might not be recorded in surviving tools or machines, but in geological markers, materials not native to Earth, or isotopic signatures that cannot be explained by terrestrial processes. In rare cases, a meteorite-like object might be found, its interior hollow, containing trace amounts of engineered compounds, and if they interacted with an earlier civilization, they may have left them with knowledge, a gift or a curse. That knowledge might have been encoded into durable structures aligned with astronomical events, like some of our own ancient monuments are. The cruel truth about geology is that the Earth is not static, it devours its own history through subduction. Vast regions of crust sink into the mantle, melting into magma and erasing any trace of what they once were. An entire continent-sized civilization could vanish without a single stone surviving at the surface, and yet, sometimes the mantle gives back fragments, diamonds bearing traces of minerals from ancient ocean floors, rocks pushed upward by volcanic activity, containing fossilized microorganisms that lived before our species was even a dream. If one day such an uplifted fragment contained remnants of worked metal, artificial alloys, or microscopic circuits, it would force us to confront the unthinkable, that deep below there are ghost cities buried in the planet's flesh. Every dig, every core sample, every fossil bed has the potential to shatter our picture of history, and yet the silence remains. This could mean there truly was no civilization before ours, or it could mean we have not yet learned how to listen. We are creatures with a short attention span compared to the Earth. We measure history in centuries. She measures it in hundreds of millions of years. The hidden ages in her rock and soil may hold truths so strange that when we finally uncover them, they will seem like myths made real. Until then, every layer we peel back is both a revelation and a reminder. The ground beneath our feet is not just dirt. It is a memory, pressed and hardened, waiting for the right question to release it. And when that question is asked and answered, it may tell us that our story is not the first. It may tell us that we are walking on a graveyard of forgotten worlds. You might picture a coastline bathed in the soft gold of an ancient sun, the light filtering through a haze that has long since dissolved from our skies. The waves lap at the edges of forgotten shores, their song unchanged across millions of years, carrying with them the faintest memory of a people who once stood where you now stand. They are gone, but their echoes remain, woven into the fabric of the world itself. The wind moves through valleys that have seen civilizations come and vanish. But in certain places, if you stand very still, you could swear you hear voices in the silence. Not words, not language as we know it, but the subtle cadence of something that once spoke here, something that knew and dreamed and built just as we do. The the rocks beneath your feet remember. Their patience is endless, their memory perfect, though they will never tell us directly what they have seen. It is strange, isn't it, how greatness leaves marks that time cannot entirely erase. Not the obvious ruins, though those may have existed, once worn down to dust or buried beneath the slow breathing of the earth. No, the true markers of a vanished greatness are more elusive than inexplicable lines in stone strata. The anomalous metals deep in ancient geological layers, the subtle patterns in the magnetic fields that shouldn't be there at all. If you were to wander into certain caves, far from any living settlement, you might notice engravings so precise, so deliberate, that no casual erosion could have made them. Shapes that suggest mathematics, spirals and ratios that whisper of minds attuned to the same universal laws we study today. And in those lines, perhaps, is the ghost of a language no human mouth has spoken, yet which feels oddly familiar, as though our own minds carry a faint resonance of its rhythm. Sometimes I wonder if we are not the first to walk this path, a slow climb from the dark into the light of reason, the forging of tools, the dreaming of structures that scrape the sky. Imagine another civilization, eons ago, building not with steel and glass, but with materials we no longer recognize, materials that have since dissolved into the soil or been transmuted by the endless churn of the planet. Imagine their city, silent, now swept away by the tides of time, leaving only the faintest signature of their existence. Perhaps they looked at the stars as we do, charting constellations, mapping worlds beyond their own. Perhaps they knew the cycles of the heavens so well that their monuments were aligned not only with the sun and moon, but with distant stars whose light has only just reached us now. And yet, their greatness was not immortal. Nature is both a cradle and a destroyer. Entire landscapes can be remade in a blink of geological time. Mountains rise, oceans swallow, continents, deserts bloom and vanish. If they had archives, they may lie deep beneath miles of rock. If they had art, it might now be nothing more than a strange mineral deposit hidden inside a cliff face. If they had music, it is a song only the atoms remember. Even their own bones, if they were like us, may have turned to dust before our kind was even a whisper in the wind. We are left not with their stories, but with hints, the kind that make you lean in closer, squint at a fragment, and wonder. The oceans guard many of these secrets. Beneath miles of water, there are plains larger than our continents, ridges and trenches that have swallowed whole chapters of the planet's history. Sonar sometimes picks up shapes too regular to be nature's work, only for the data to vanish into archives no one revisits. Divers tell of smooth walls under the silt, of corridors that seem to lead somewhere, but collapse under the touch. Scientists explain them away as quirks of geology, and perhaps they are. But perhaps the truth is stranger that the sea holds. The bones of an age before ours, an age that learned to live with forces we can barely comprehend. If they traveled across those ancient waters, they might have left markers, beacons, or devices to guide their way. We have found none we can confirm. But then, how many relics might still be sleeping beneath the crushing weight of the deep? Even the myths we keep close might be the long-faded shadows of their reality. Tales of sunken kingdoms, sky people, and beings who shaped the earth with their will. These merely the dreams of our ancestors, or fragments of memory passed down through countless tongues, eroded into legend. You might imagine a child of that earlier world, standing under the same moon we see tonight, asking their elders who built the great structures that rose from their horizon, The elders might have told them stories of an even earlier people, making the mystery older still. And so, layer upon layer, the truth becomes a tapestry of half-remembered truths and inventions. There is a theory that greatness, true planetary greatness, cannot be entirely hidden. It leaves fingerprints in the most unlikely places, in the alignment of certain mountain ridges, too perfect to be accident, in the sudden jump of a species' evolution, as though an unseen hand nudged it forward, in the strange isotopes that appear in deep strata, ones we can produce only in reactors today. Could it be that our distant predecessors knew something we do not, something that let them shape life itself? Or perhaps they simply reached further than we dare, touching the same dangerous forces that hum quietly in the heart of every star. And here the whispers turn stranger still. In rare accounts from researchers who study these anomalies, there is talk of materials that behave as though they are not entirely from here, not foreign in the sense of another country, but foreign in the sense of another origin entirely. Metals with crystal lattice unknown in nature, substances that resist decay far beyond our best alloys. We do not know if these are the remnants of some ancient experiment, or if they are gifts or tools left behind by something not of this earth. If such things exist, they are locked away in vaults, far from public eyes, their stories untold in the stillness of night. When the air is cool and the stars unblinking, you might wonder what it felt like to live in that age of greatness. Were they proud? Were they at peace? Or did they, like us, wrestle with the fear that even the brightest flame burns out? It is possible that they, too, sensed the shadow of decline, the oceans rising, the skies shifting, the ground beneath them growing restless. Perhaps they watched their own monuments crumble, unable or unwilling to stop it. Perhaps they left, taking their knowledge beyond our reach, into the void between stars. If they did, then the echoes we hear now are not only of loss, but of a journey still unfolding. Somewhere far away, you might picture them as more than human or less, depending on your view. Not bound by our biology, but shaped by it in ways we cannot yet fathom. They may have walked among us long after their cities fell, guiding or warning, leaving signs too subtle for us to see. They may have chosen to vanish entirely, letting the earth heal, waiting for another mind to rise and look upon the horizon with the same yearning they once felt. That mind, in this age, is ours. And so, when we speak of echoes, we do not speak only of sound, but of presence. The faint impressions in stone, the alignments in the stars, the patterns in myth, they are all the quiet reminders that we may be part of something far older, far larger than we have imagined. The greatness of that earlier world is gone, but its shadow lies across our own age, a gentle hand on our shoulder, urging us to listen. In the deep places of the earth and the silent expanses of the sea, the past still breathes, waiting for the day we are ready to hear its voice again. The ocean is the world's oldest vault, a keeper of time whose locks are pressure and silence. It swallows the ruins of empires, hides the bones of great beasts, and tucks away stories we may never fully read. We like to think of it as a backdrop, an unchanging blue that cradles life, but in truth, it is an ever-shifting labyrinth, one that has erased and concealed far more than it has revealed. The land changes slowly. The sea changes in an instant. Whole coastlines have been swallowed in a single night, storms tearing away what once stood proud and sure. The waves return to calm, the surface smooth as glass, but below, a new chapter of history lies buried in the silt. If there ever was an advanced civilization before us, the ocean is where much of it would sleep now, scattered in trenches and on abyssal plains far beyond the reach of sunlight. Consider the maps we have of the world. The continents are neat and familiar, their borders drawn and studied. Yet the ocean floor remains a patchwork of guesses and approximations. We know more about the surface of Mars than about the depths beneath our own feet. Only a small fraction has been mapped with any real precision, and even less has been explored in person. When sonar sweeps do brush against something unexpected, strange angular forms, ridges too symmetrical for comfort, they are quickly catalogued as natural features and forgotten. But the ocean is not careless in its keeping. It does not shape perfect right angles by accident. If such geometry exists down there, it is because hands, or perhaps something like hands, once shaped it. Legends of lost cities beneath the waves are older than writing. Atlantis is the most famous, but it is only one of countless tales. In the Pacific, the people of Micronesia speak of Non-Matal, a city built on coral reefs long before European ships crossed those waters. Its massive basalt columns forming canals and temples whose origins remain mysterious. In the Mediterranean, fishermen tell of stone streets glimpsed through the clear water on still days, roads that lead nowhere, their destinations buried in sand. Along the coasts of India, submerged temple complexes lie hidden beneath layers of sediment, revealed only during extreme low tides. Each of these may be the work of known civilizations, their histories already half recovered. But what if they are fragments of something older still? What if the oldest of these ruins were already ancient before the cultures we attribute them to were even born? The ocean floor is not static. Currents act like invisible archaeologists, burying and unburying relics in slow, deliberate motions. A shipwreck from a century ago may vanish entirely, while something from tens of thousands of years past might be revealed by a shifting sandbar. If there was a civilization before Uswan, capable of building, of shaping stone and metal, is possible that their coastal cities were claimed by the sea during a sudden rise in ocean levels. This is not speculation. It has happened before. At the end of the last ice age, the melting of glaciers caused sea levels to rise by over 400 feet, drowning entire landscapes that had once been dry. Imagine what might have been lost then, not just to water, but to history. Imagine how many human hands, or perhaps other hands, once left marks now softened by coral and the slow creep of marine life. The most tantalizing finds are often the smallest. Artifacts hauled up in fishing nets, strange objects washed ashore after storms. Some are dismissed as debris, others as hoaxes, but every so often there is one that refuses easy explanation. A shard of metal alloyed in ways our ancestors should not have known, dated to a time when no complex societies supposedly existed. A ceramic disc found embedded in coral that appears to carry a pattern more akin to circuitry than to art. Officially, these anomalies are either misdated or misunderstood, but privately, even some marine archaeologists admit to wondering, what if the ocean floor is not merely a graveyard, but a warehouse, preserving the tools and traces of a lost intelligence? And then there are the deep trenches, places no sunlight reaches, where the weight of the water is so great that it crushes steel. In these depths, strange life thrives, creatures with luminous organs, bodies adapted to pressures that would shatter ours in an instant. Here, too, there could be relics beyond imagination, perfectly preserved in the frigid darkness. We tell ourselves that nothing could live or build in such conditions, but life has a way of appearing where it is least expected. What if a civilization had the means to flourish at those depths, untouched by storms or surface disasters? What if, instead of fleeing into the stars, they simply moved downward into the endless night beneath the waves? We would never know. Some sonar readings, when examined carefully, hint at vast regular shapes within these abysses, lines to clean, depressions to uniform. But confirmation is difficult. Sending a submersible that deep is costly and dangerous, and results rarely justify the expense. Yet whispers circulate among certain scientific circles about expeditions that returned with footage not meant for public eyes, glimpses of towering structures encrusted in life, doorways far larger than any human would require, and carvings worn but still legible in their alien symmetry. If true, these images would suggest a scale of construction far beyond what we think possible for any pre-human culture. But without proof, they remain stories traded quietly over coffee and in back corners of conferences. It is not just ruins. The ocean may hide. If the myths are to be believed, there were beings tied intimately to the sea gods, serpents, merfolk creatures, described with unnerving consistency across continents. In some versions, they came from below, teaching early humans the arts of navigation, agriculture, and architecture. In others, they demanded offerings, enforcing a kind of law over those who dared to sail too far. These could be nothing more than stories born from the fear of the unknown. But what if they are distorted memories of actual contact? If an ancient civilization mastered the oceans, they may have seemed otherworldly to the scattered hunter-gatherers they encountered. There is also the unsettling possibility that not all ocean mysteries are from the deep past. Strange sounds have been recorded in recent decades, mechanical in nature, and originating from depths no submarine has reached. Some are brief, like the now-famous bloop of 1997, so loud it could be heard across thousands of miles. Others are rhythmic, persistent, and eerily regular, as though produced by vast machines still operating in the abyss. Official explanations range from shifting ice to seismic activity, yet none fully account for the patterns. If something built those sounds something vast, hidden, and ancient, then perhaps the ocean is not only a grave but a sanctuary, and its guardians are still at work. The alien element is difficult to dismiss. Spacefaring civilizations, if they exist, might well choose to hide beneath the oceans of habitable planets. Water offers perfect camouflage, insulation from cosmic radiation, and abundant resources. On Earth, any such presence could remain undetected for millennia. It is possible that an earlier civilization here was not entirely native, or that they shared the planet with visitors from elsewhere. If so, the ocean may still hold vehicles, structures, or even entire settlements that are not of this world, lying undisturbed except for the curious eyes of deep sea life. And perhaps that is why so little effort is put into revealing the ocean's deepest secrets. What would happen if tomorrow we confirmed that the sea floor holds the remains of an advanced, non-human culture, one that predates us by millions of years? How would our religions shift? How would our governments respond? Would we be inspired or paralyzed by the knowledge that we are not unique? It is easier to let the ocean keep its silence. Still, the sea cannot hide forever. Currents shift, tectonic plates move, and storms scour the seabed. Each year, new fragments appear: a wall here, a statue there, a tablet whose markings no one can translate. Each discovery feels like a whisper from the past, urging us to look closer. Perhaps the ocean is not merely guarding these things, but waiting for us to be ready to find them. Perhaps it understands that knowledge is a tide, and that it must rise at the right moment, lest it sweep us away before we are ready to swim in it. And so, we keep scanning. Keep sending our fragile machines into the crushing depths. Keep listening for those impossible sounds. The ocean's guarded secrets are not lost. They are simply waiting, wrapped in the darkness and pressure of time. One day, whether by accident or design, we will open the right door at the bottom of the sea, and the flood of truth will rise to meet us. Until then, the deep watches and remembers, as it always has, cradling the echoes of an age that may yet speak again. Some objects are born to fit neatly into the story we tell ourselves about the past. A shard of pottery dated to a known culture, a rusted blade tied to a familiar age. These are the artifacts we welcome safe, predictable pieces of a puzzle we already think we understand. But then there are the others, the ones that arrive like a voice speaking a language we've never heard. They are wrong in ways that unsettle us, too old for their craftsmanship, too advanced for the age to which they are assigned, or too strange to belong anywhere at all. Officially, we call them out-of-place artifacts, but in truth, they are cracks in the story. And if you lean close enough, you can hear something breathing on the other side. The first of these mysteries can be as small as a bead. In 1851, miners working in Massachusetts blasted open a seam of solid rock and found, buried within it, a metallic vase delicately inlaid with silver lying inside. Stone that geologists claimed was over 500 million years old. Such a date is absurd if you believe human history begins only tens of thousands of years ago. The vase vanished into private hands, and today only sketches remain. Perhaps it was a hoax, as many insist, or perhaps it was simply one of those glimpses into an older, deeper world we are not meant to remember. Other finds are harder to dismiss. In 1938, deep within the caves of the Bayan Karula Mountains, on the border of China and Tibet, archaeologists unearthed hundreds of stone discs, each with a central hole and spiraling grooves engraved with tiny, almost microscopic writing. The translation, if it is to be believed, told the story of a people who came from the stars and were stranded on Earth thousands of years ago. They were not gods, but travelers, their ship damaged, their home forever out of reach. The locals called them the Dropa, and the discs, if real, were their record. Critics dismiss the tale as fantasy, but the discs themselves, held briefly in museums before vanishing into storage, have not been entirely forgotten. Some researchers still whisper that a few survive in hidden collections, their grooves holding a truth too alien for our timelines. And then there is the matter of the London hammer. Found in 1936 by a couple walking in Texas, it appeared to be a modern hammerhead embedded in rock, supposedly over 100 million years old. The handle, partially petrified, suggested a great age, yet the iron head was pure and uncorroded, manufactured in a way no known pre-industrial culture could achieve. Skeptics argue it is a case of a modern object becoming encased in ancient stone through natural processes, but others point to its strange metallurgy, its perfect fit within the fossilized matrix, and wonder who held it last and when. Not all of these anomalies are singular. Across the world, there are places where similar impossible artifacts keep appearing, as if certain sites were once hubs of an entirely different age. In South America, deep within the jungles of Colombia, gold artifacts shaped like winged machines have been found in ancient tombs. To modern eyes, they resemble airplanes, complete with tail fins and landing gear-like protrusions. Officially, They are stylized depictions of insects or birds. But aerodynamic testing has shown that scaled-up replicas of these designs can actually fly. Was this coincidence or the memory of something once seen in the sky? Perhaps most unsettling are the mechanical artifacts. The Antikythera mechanism, recovered from a Greek shipwreck in 1901, is now famous as an ancient analog computer capable of predicting astronomical positions. It dates to around 100 BCE, yet its precision gearwork is so advanced that nothing like it appears again for more than 1,000 years. If such knowledge existed then, where did it come from? Was it invented once, lost, and then reinvented, or was it a fragment passed down from a much older, forgotten era? There are stranger things still. In 1972, deep in the uranium mines of Oklo, Gabon, scientists discovered a natural nuclear reactor, except it wasn't entirely natural. The reaction had been precisely balanced, maintained at stable levels over hundreds of thousands of years. Some have argued it is the result of a rare geological coincidence. Others see it as a relic, evidence that a sophisticated intelligence once understood and harnessed nuclear energy long before we appeared. Fossils, too, have their anomalies. In a coal seam in Illinois, a human-like footprint was found, its outline crisp in rock over 300 million years old. In Kentucky, miners discovered an iron pot embedded in a lump of coal. In Nevada, a fossilized shoeprint, complete with a clearly defined heel emerged from shale dated to over 200 million years in the past. Each of these is explained away as misidentification, pareidolia, or outright fabrication, yet the pattern remains, artifacts and impressions surfacing where no human should have stood, let alone worked metal or worn shoes. The fiction creeps in when you start to imagine the lives behind these things. A craftsman in a city that no longer exists, hammering a piece of silver into a pattern his teacher learned from someone older still. A pilot stepping from the cockpit of a machine that will be buried in legend, his likeness becoming that of a bird god in carvings. A navigator turning the gears of a device under a sky that does not quite match our constellations. These are not simply relics. They are fingerprints pressed into the clay of time, still faintly warm if you know how to touch them. Some artifacts seem to hint not at human hands, but at something ... adjacent. Tools shaped for grips unlike ours. Symbols that match no known language, yet repeat in multiple finds across different continents. In one case, almost buried in the back pages of a 1960s science journal, was the report of a small metallic sphere found in South Africa, perfectly balanced and scored with 3 parallel grooves. Its alloy unlike anything on Earth. It sat in a museum drawer for years before vanishing, its label removed as though it had never been. When such things appear, there are always 2 explanations, the official one and the quiet one. The official is tidy, the quiet one is unsettling. It asks whether these artifacts are evidence of a civilization that rose, peaked, and fell long before us, or whether they belong to travelers from elsewhere who came and went like shadows. Both possibilities change everything we think we know. Both suggest that we are not the first to leave our mark here. And then comes the question no one likes to ask, where are the rest? If a hammer, a disc, or a vase survived, surely more must be out there. But perhaps they lie where no one is looking, beneath miles of ice, deep in ocean trenches, locked in caves where the air has not shifted in thousands of years. Or perhaps they are already in our museums and private collections, mislabeled, mistaken for something ordinary. their stories silenced by the simple act of not asking the right question. From time to time, a whisper escapes. A diver finds an object too heavy for its size, etched with markings that glow faintly when wet. A farmer turns up a shard of glass in his field that refuses to scratch, even under steel. A satellite survey catches a flash of light in a desert canyon where no human has walked in memory. These things vanish quickly, bought, taken, locked away, but for a brief moment they exist in the open. And in that moment they remind us that the world is older, stranger, and more crowded with ghosts than we admit. If these artifacts truly should not exist, then either our timeline is wrong, or our assumptions about who or what walked this earth before us are incomplete. Perhaps the great civilizations of the past were not singular, but layered, each one rising on the bones of the last. Perhaps the gap between their final day and our first step was longer than we can imagine, or shorter than we dare believe, and somewhere out there, more of them wait, not in museums, but in the dark, where the earth and water have wrapped them in secrecy, waiting, perhaps, not just to be found, but to be recognized. Because it is one thing to dig up an object, it is another to look at it and truly understand what it means. Until then, they remain what they are, questions in solid form, whispers you can hold in your hand. And every time one surfaces, the story we tell ourselves about who we are trembles, just a little, beneath the weight of what might have been. Stories are the oldest things we carry. They are older than cities, older than nations, older even than names. They pass through the centuries like seeds on the wind, changing shape, shedding details, taking on new colors, but always carrying some hidden kernel at their core. Most people think of myths as entertainment, or as clumsy attempts by ancient minds to explain the world. But there is another possibility, one both far stranger and more unsettling. What if myths are not inventions at all, but memories? Memories of things that really happened, so far back in time that their truth could only survive in the form of story. Consider the flood myths, from the Epic of Gilgamesh in Mesopotamia to the tale of Manu in ancient India, from the legend of Deucalion in Greece to the stories told by indigenous peoples of the Americas and Pacific Islands. There is a shared memory of a world drowned. The details shift. Sometimes the waters come from rain, sometimes from the sea, sometimes from the anger of gods, but the pattern is unmistakable. Entire civilizations wiped away in a single cataclysm, with only a handful of survivors carrying forward the memory. Scholars explain this as a reflection of the end of the last ice age, when melting glaciers caused massive flooding. But the stories themselves sometimes hint at something stranger. Skies darkened by fire before the waters rose, or the stars changing their positions as if the very world had moved. Then there are the tales of sky beings. In almost every ancient culture, there are stories of luminous visitors descending from above, bringing gifts of knowledge, tools, and laws, only to vanish again into the heavens. In Sumerian myths, the Anunnaki descended from heaven to earth to shape the destiny of humankind. In the traditions of the Dogon people of Mali, amphibious beings called the Namo came from a star in the Sirius system, teaching agriculture, astronomy, and ethics. Polynesian legends speak of Tangaroa, a god of the sea, who traveled in a bright canoe that could rise into the clouds and vanish. These are usually called allegories, or dismissed as poetic metaphors for meteorites or unusual weather. But what if they are accounts of real encounters, distorted by time? Some myths are more unnervingly precise. The ancient Sanskrit texts of India describe flying machines called vimanas, capable of traveling as swiftly as thought and engaging in aerial battles with weapons that sound eerily like modern descriptions of energy beams or nuclear blasts. The Mahabharata tells of a city reduced to ash by a weapon so bright that it was like 10,000 suns. Archaeologists have found evidence of ancient glassified stone formed only under extreme heat in parts of India and Pakistan. Officially, this is explained as the result of lightning strikes or meteor impacts, but it's hard to ignore how closely the physical evidence matches the mythic descriptions. There is also the strange consistency of giant myths, from the Nephilim of biblical lore to the frost giants of Norse mythology, from the titans of Greek legend to the enormous beings described by Native American tribes. The theme repeats. Once, the earth was home to a race of beings far larger than us. Skeletal remains of unusually large humans have been reported for centuries, though most vanish into obscurity after further study. Skeptics point out that no verifiable remains exist in modern scientific archives, yet the stories persist, whispered from one generation to the next, as if some ancient truth refuses to be entirely buried. If myths are indeed memories, then the way they spread becomes even more fascinating. Oral traditions, passed from elder to child, can last for astonishing lengths of time. Anthropologists studying Aboriginal Australian cultures have found stories describing geological events, volcanic eruptions, shifting coastlines that match geological evidence from over 7,000 years ago. If stories can survive intact for millennia, why not tens of millennia? Why not longer? Perhaps the impossible accounts of sky vessels, star travelers, and vanished continents are not inventions, but deep time echoes of real events from civilizations now erased from history. And what about Atlantis? Plato claimed his account was no myth but a record passed down through Egyptian priests, describing a great island civilization destroyed by the sea in a single day and night of misfortune. While most treat it as allegory, others have searched the sea floor for its remains. Similar tales exist far beyond Greece, legends of sunken kingdoms in Celtic, Indian, and Pacific lore. Could they all be fragments of the same story, remembered differently in different corners of the world? Alien contact theories, often dismissed as fringe speculation, gain a strange sort of plausibility under this lens. If an advanced civilization, whether terrestrial or from the stars, visited humanity in its infancy, their presence would be overwhelming, unforgettable. Over time, details would blur, but the essence would remain: beings of power and knowledge, arriving from elsewhere, shaping human destiny, and leaving behind tools, laws, or warnings. To later generations, the memory of such visitors would be indistinguishable from tales of gods. But if myths are memories, we have to ask why the events they describe are no longer part of our world. Did the visitors leave? Did the civilizations fall? Were the survivors so traumatized that they turned the truth into allegory to protect themselves from its weight? There is an eerie pattern in many of these myths. The gods depart, the giants are slain, the skyships vanish, and humankind is left to start again, smaller, weaker, and less certain. It's almost as if there is a cycle: an age of contact, an age of catastrophe, an age of forgetting. Some researchers believe that myths may even contain encrypted astronomical data, star alignments, celestial events, orbital patterns coded into symbolic language. The great epics and sagas may be more than just stories. They could be ancient archives, preserving knowledge in a form that could survive fire, flood, and empire. For example, the Pleiades star cluster, appears in myths from Japan to the Americas to ancient Greece, often with remarkably similar symbolic associations. Why would the same stars be so important to cultures separated by oceans and millennia? In fiction, it is tempting to imagine that somewhere deep in the deserts, under the oceans, or hidden beneath ice, there are still vaults where the original records remain intact, stone tablets, holographic archives, or crystalline data cores, waiting to be uncovered. The storytellers of old would have called them the halls of the gods or the hidden library, but to us, they might look like alien repositories or the remnants of a lost technological age. If that is true, then myths are not only memories, they are maps. They point toward places where the past might still be touched, where the line between legend and history blurs into something uncomfortably real. Following them means accepting that our ancestors were not naive, that they saw and knew things beyond our current understanding. It also means risking the possibility that the myths end not in triumph, but in warnings about repeating the same mistakes. And maybe that is why these stories endure. Not because they are comforting, but because they are necessary. They remind you, as through symbols, heroes, and monsters, that the world has ended before, that civilizations have risen and fallen, and that there are forces, earthly or otherwise, that shape our fate. Whether the truth behind them is human, alien, or some blend of both, the fact remains, they are the oldest history we have, and perhaps the most honest. So the next time you hear an ancient story of a hero who spoke with gods, of a city swallowed by the sea, of a war fought in the sky, listen closely. Not for the fantasy, but for the pattern beneath it. For in those patterns may lie the record of the time before our time, the age before this one, and the echoes of voices that spoke not from imagination, but from memory. There is a certain moment in the night sky that humbles every human who has ever looked upward, the moment when you realize that the stars are not lights hanging in a dome, but suns in their own right, scattered across a vast and incomprehensible space. It's a moment that often leads to a question so ancient it has no first asking, what's out there? But perhaps the question we should be asking is more unsettling. Who's been there before us? We think of space exploration as our great, defining leap into the unknown, the hallmark of modern civilization. Yet our own achievements, rockets, satellites, probes are still tentative steps compared to the distances and energies involved in true interstellar travel. And if we are honest, they are crude steps, barely scraping the edges of the cosmic shore. But what if someone or something walked that shore long before us? What if an earlier civilization, native to Earth, reached for the stars ages before we ever lit our first fire? The idea sounds impossible at first. Technology decays quickly. Even our most durable creation stone, gold, ceramics, would not survive more than a few tens of thousands of years without care. Metal corrodes, plastics break down, glass is shattered and buried. A technological culture 100,000 years ago could have built cities of steel and glass, and not a trace would remain today except for subtle anomalies in the geology. The ocean floor, with its slow accumulation of sediment, could hide entire histories, yet there are whispers in the archaeological record. Ancient maps, such as the Piri Race chart, depict coastlines and land masses that should not have been known to the mapmakers of their time, coastlines free of ice, suggesting they were charted thousands of years before recorded history. In myths, there are tales of bearded strangers who arrived from the sea with rods that spoke with light, who taught navigation by the stars. The Dogon people of Mali, without telescopes, knew details of the Sirius star system that modern astronomy only confirmed in the 20th century. If an earlier civilization reached space, it might have left behind more than stories. It might have left artifacts. And yet, where would we find them? Not necessarily on Earth. If they had the capability to leave the planet, they could have hidden things elsewhere, on the moon, where there is no erosion, on asteroids, where objects could remain untouched for millions of years, or even in distant orbits, where a craft could drift silently, undisturbed, until someone stumbles upon it. Science fiction often imagines alien civilizations visiting us, but the stranger scenario is that the aliens might be the earlier us. If our predecessors reached orbit, built stations, or even explored other planets, some trace of their work could remain. Lunar soil, for example, contains particles from billions of years of solar history, undisturbed by wind or water. A probe or base built there 50,000 years ago might still stand, dusty but intact, like a fossil of technology. And there's another unsettling thought. What if they didn't just leave, but they left intentionally? The Earth has been through multiple extinction events, from asteroid impacts to volcanic winters. Perhaps they saw one coming and made the choice to flee, launching generation ships toward habitable worlds. To them, we might be the descendants of those who stayed behind, their less technologically advanced kin, left to rebuild civilization after the skies cleared. In that case, they could still be out there, somewhere among the stars, far older than our species, yet still bearing the memory of our shared homeworld. The myths of star people start to take on a different meaning under this light. The Cherokees speak of visitors from the Pleiades who came to Earth not as conquerors, but as kin. In Polynesian lore, navigators spoke of star roads, paths across the night sky, along which ancestors traveled. The ancient Egyptian texts refer to the Duat, a realm among the stars, where the gods traveled in solar boats. Were these poetic visions or distorted memories of spaceflight? In fiction, one might imagine the evidence lying in wait for us. A derelict craft drifting at a Lagrange point, its design eerily similar to our own, yet stamped with symbols no linguist can decipher. A crater on Mars that, when imaged at higher resolution, reveals the faint outline of geometric structures. An asteroid mined and hollowed out so precisely that it could only have been the work of intelligence. In reality, some anomalies already exist. The monolithic object Oumuamua, which passed through our solar system in 2017, behaved in ways no comet or asteroid should, leading a few scientists to suggest it might be artificial. Officially, the consensus is natural object, but what if it wasn't? The leap from planetary to interstellar civilization is enormous, but not impossible. With the right advances in energy, propulsion, and resource extraction, even a species with our current level of knowledge could start building ships capable of reaching nearby stars in a few centuries. A civilization with a million-year head start could have mapped the entire galaxy, and if they began here, they would have had the most personal of motives to preserve some record of their journey, whether as a message to us or as a beacon to guide themselves home. But why haven't we found such records? Perhaps because we're not looking in the right way. Our search for extraterrestrial intelligence SETI is built on the assumption that others will be transmitting signals in ways we can detect. But what if an ancient Earth-born civilization had no interest in broadcasting? Or what if their communication methods, quantum entanglement, neutrino beams, gravitational wave modulation, are invisible to our instruments? In that case, their legacy might be hiding in plain sight, in forms we cannot yet perceive. There's also the possibility that they did not survive. Space is as dangerous as it is vast. A single navigational error, a solar flare, a collision at high velocity, any of these could spell the end for a spacefaring population. Or perhaps they reached the stars only to encounter something else, another intelligence, less welcoming than they hoped. The myths that speak of wars in the sky might not be allegories at all, but fading memories of a conflict fought far above the clouds, with weapons and consequences beyond our comprehension. If they did survive, if they are still out there, would they recognize us? To them, we would be primitives, barely industrial, only just reaching beyond our atmosphere. They might watch us as we watch tribal societies on Earth, studying without interfering. Or perhaps they do interfere, subtly nudging technological development, planting ideas in the minds of scientists and engineers, ensuring that we eventually follow the same path they once took. And then there's the most haunting possibility of all, that they are waiting for us. Somewhere, perhaps in orbit around a distant star, a ship sleeps. Its crew, or their descendants, have maintained it for millennia, waiting for the day their homeworld produces beings capable of meeting them as equals. In their view, our space age is not the beginning of human exploration, is the homecoming of a species that has already been to the stars and forgotten. If such a meeting were to happen, the psychological shock would be immense. We would not just be encountering aliens, but relatives older, wiser, and unimaginably advanced. They could tell us the true history of Earth, the real timeline of our species, the fate of the civilizations that rose before us. They might show us images of our planet as it looked 100,000 years ago, bustling with cities and spaceports. And they might offer us a choice to join them in the galaxy, or to remain as we are. Until then, we search. We send probes into the void, point our radio telescopes at distant suns, and dream of reaching other worlds. But perhaps, one night, we will look up at the stars and realize that we are not reaching into emptiness. We are reaching toward home. It is one thing for a civilization to fall. We have seen it happen countless times in human history. The Maya abandoning their cities to the jungle, the Roman Empire shrinking into a shadow of itself, the Indus Valley culture vanishing into the mists of time. But even in collapse, they leave something behind: ruins, artifacts, bones, inscriptions. We can follow the trail of their existence like breadcrumbs through the past. But what if there was a civilization that left nothing? No crumbling temples, no forgotten roads, no half-buried statues, only a strange silence in the record, a missing chapter in Earth's story. How could an entire world, a whole age of sentient beings, vanish so completely that even the memory of their existence is barely a whisper? The possibility is both fascinating and unnerving, because for such an erasure to occur, it would require not just destruction, but obliteration of memory, of matter, and perhaps of meaning itself. Our planet is a restless thing. Continents drift, mountains rise and crumble, oceans advance and retreat. The geological clock is a relentless eraser. In 1,000,000 years, most human cities will have vanished without a trace. Their remains ground into dust or swallowed by the sea. Now stretch that timescale further 10 million years, 100 million, and the surface of the Earth could be completely rewritten. An ancient civilization's grandest achievements might exist now only as flecks of mineral in the rock, indistinguishable from nature's own work. If they had the knowledge, they might have seen this coming. Perhaps they knew that survival on geological timescales required more than mere endurance. It required leaving the planet altogether. In that case, their disappearance might have been a migration, not a death. They may have departed en masse, abandoning Earth to its cycles, leaving no one behind to tell their story. But why leave no trace for future generations? Why not erect a monument, carve their truth into the bedrock, or leave machines that could endure the ages? Perhaps they didn't. We have mistaken them for natural formations, or their signals for background noise. Or perhaps they feared that what came after them might not be friendly. This brings us to a darker possibility. They did not vanish of their own choosing. They were erased. The universe is not a quiet place. It may hold countless forms of life, and not all of them would welcome competitors. If an earlier civilization reached a certain level of advancement, they might have attracted attention. In speculative astrophysics, there is the dark forest theory, the idea that civilizations remain silent because the cosmos is a dangerous place, and broadcasting your existence is an invitation to be destroyed. If this is true, then perhaps our predecessors broke that silence and paid the price. Some myths speak of wars in the sky, of gods striking down entire peoples in flashes of fire. To us, they are allegories for natural disasters or moral lessons, but to those who lived them, they might have been literal, the last memories of a civilization annihilated from orbit. Its cities vaporized, its oceans boiled, its survivors scattered into extinction. Even without cosmic intervention, Earth itself is a ruthless warden. Consider the supervolcano beneath Yellowstone, which erupts every 600,000 years on average. Such an event would not just devastate a region, it would plunge the entire planet into a volcanic winter, collapsing food chains and wiping out entire societies. Or the asteroid impact 66 million years ago that ended the reign of the dinosaurs. Impact that would do the same to any advanced culture unlucky enough to be in its path. If our lost civilization was global, its fall would have been cataclysmic. Perhaps their final years were marked by desperate measures, launching their knowledge into space, storing genetic libraries in vaults on the moon, or sending their youngest generations on generation ships to seek other worlds. In that case, their vanishing was not an end but a dispersal, the scattering of their people into the cosmos. And here's a strange thought. What if they came back? Imagine they left, survived elsewhere, and returned much later only to find Earth already repopulated by their distant cousins, who had no memory of them. The visitors might have blended in, become myths, or taken on the role of gods in early human societies. In this version, the vanishing wasn't a disappearance at all, but a transformation from mortal beings into legends. But there's another angle to consider, one that chills the imagination. What if they didn't just vanish physically, but intentionally erased themselves from history? Technology far beyond our own could allow for the deletion of all material traces, the dismantling of infrastructure, even the erasure of genetic evidence. Such an act could have been born from shame, fear, or some pact we cannot fathom. If they had done something unforgivably, unleashed horrors on the Earth or the wider galaxy, they might have chosen to remove themselves entirely, to prevent their legacy from ever being known. Even more unsettling is the possibility that their erasure was not self-inflicted, but imposed. A higher intelligence alien machine, or something else entirely, could have rewritten the Earth's hard drive, selectively deleting an entire epoch. In this view, we live on a world that has already been edited, our history carefully pruned. What we think of as the whole story is, in fact, a fragment. Evidence for such a thing might not be obvious, but anomalies do exist. Certain layers in the geological record contain isotopes that don't fit. Known natural processes, tiny blips that could be industrial signatures. Ancient lakebeds contain spherical particles of metal too uniform to be volcanic in origin, scattered as though from a great, distant blast. And deep beneath Antarctic ice, radar has revealed strange geometric patterns, so regular that some scientists have privately admitted they look artificial. Still, mainstream science hesitates to leap to such conclusions. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and right now we have only hints. But hints have a way of gathering, and as technology advances, our ability to scan, dig, and probe the planet will only grow. We may yet find something, a buried structure that predates humanity, a machine still humming quietly in the dark, a vault inscribed with warnings in a language no one speaks anymore. Until then, we are left with the mystery. Somewhere in the deep corridors of time, there may have been a civilization that matched or surpassed our own, one that saw the same stars, dreamed the same dreams, and reached for the same impossible goals. And then, one day, they were gone. No ruins, no bones, no words, only the silence. And perhaps that silence is not empty at all, but waiting. There is a moment, if you've ever stood alone in an open field at night, when the silence becomes so deep it feels alive. Above you, the stars spill across the black in impossible numbers, ancient light from suns long dead. Beneath your feet, the earth hums with the faint, endless vibration of life and time. And in that moment, a question forms not in words, but in the quiet part of the mind that still remembers the feeling of being small in a very old world. How much of this story are we really in? We like to imagine that history began with us, that the line of civilization runs straight from the first stone tools to the first villages, to the first cities, and then to the dazzling complexity of our modern age. But the earth is not a book that was written once and for all. It is a palimpsest, a manuscript written over and over, the old words scraped away to make room for new ones. And if you look closely enough, you can still see the ghost letters beneath. Every continent carries secrets. In the Amazon, satellite scans reveal the shapes of geometric earthworks far older than the rainforest itself. In the Sahara, beneath, dunes that have shifted for millennia, radar images suggest the faint outlines of massive stone foundations. In Antarctica, buried under miles of ice, scientists whisper of patterns too precise to be accidents of geology. We explain these anomalies as quirks of nature or as the work of early human hands. But what if they are the last breath of something far older? If there truly was a civilization before us, one that rose, thrived, and fell before humanity had even begun its climb, then their story is not just history. It is a mirror. Consider the arc of our own progress, the first spark of fire, the shaping of metal, the wheel, the written word, the steam engine, the splitting of the atom, the mapping of our own DNA. Every step builds upon the last, accelerating the pace until we reach a point where our achievements and our mistakes carry planetary consequences. Could another species have walked this same path, reached this same precipice, and then tipped over into the abyss? And if they did, what was the final straw? Some imagine a natural disaster so immense it swept them away without warning. An asteroid, a supervolcano, a sudden reversal of the magnetic poles. Others see a more familiar enda, slow unraveling from within. Environmental collapse, unchecked weapons, or technologies they could not control. If the latter is true, then the universe has a strange way of recycling lessons. Perhaps we are being given the same test, a second chance to answer a question we don't even remember being asked. Yet there is a third, more haunting possibility. they did not perish at all. They left. We assume that departure would be obvious starships streaking into the dark, colonies planted on distant worlds. But what if their exodus was quieter, stranger, a migration not of bodies but of consciousness, their minds uploaded into vast, self-sustaining networks, or into forms we would not even recognize as life? If they have evolved beyond matter, then they might still be here, moving among us in ways we cannot detect, watching as we stumble toward the same crossroads. Some myths seem to hint at this. Across cultures, there are stories of shining beings who came from the sky, taught humanity agriculture, astronomy, or language, and then vanished, promising to return when the time is right. The simplest interpretation is that these were gods or spirits, but what if they were neighbors, the survivors of an earlier Earth, checking in on the new tenants? It's not hard to imagine them looking at us the way we look at the ruins of a once great city, curious, nostalgic, perhaps even regretful. They might see in us echoes of themselves, the same ambition, the same ingenuity, and perhaps the same flaws. And here is the uncomfortable part. If they truly exist, they have not revealed themselves. That silence might mean they are bound by some non-interference principle. Or it might mean they are waiting to see whether we pass the test they failed. The truth is, we stand at a strange point in time. We can map the surface of Mars better than the bottom of our own oceans. We can read the chemical signature of atmospheres light years away, but not the erased history beneath our feet. We can send our voices into space, but we do not know whether anyone here or out there is listening. If there was another civilization, their rise and fall would make our history feel small and fragile. It would show us that intelligence does not guarantee survival, that progress is not a straight line, but a fragile spiral that can collapse in on itself. But it might also give us hope. If they reached the stars before us, if they mastered sciences we have not yet imagined, then their story suggests that the universe allows such greatness to exist. And if they survived somewhere out there in the deep night, then perhaps one day, beneath these same stars, we will meet them. Until then, we live beneath an endless sky, the same sky they once knew. Every sunrise they saw still burns over the horizon. Every constellation they traced still shines above our heads. Somewhere, their footprints may still lie hidden beneath layers of soil and stone. And perhaps, in the quiet hours, when the wind moves just right, the earth itself remembers them, because the past is never truly gone. It waits, patient and silent, in the cracks of time. And sometimes, if you listen closely enough, you can almost hear it breathing.